Have you ever looked at something and thought there was something more to it? Something that, at first, seems completely normal, but the longer you look at it, the more you start to question what you're actually looking at. That's exactly how I feel about In Memory by NPando 1. At first, it seems like a strange Roblox horror game about exploring an empty, seemingly endless office and solving puzzles. But the more you actually pay attention to what's happening, the more questions start to appear. Why are we here? Why does this office seem to go on forever? Why does everything feel like a distorted version of something that should be familiar? Who are the strange pale figures watching us? And perhaps the biggest question of all, what actually happened to the player? Welcome back to the Pak'sProducts YouTube channel. In today's video, we will be talking about a brand new game on Roblox, In Memory by NPando 1. Let's start with the most obvious clue. The title of the game. In Memory. Not memory or memories. In memory. That wording can be interpreted in a couple different ways. Something can be in memory because it happened in the past, but it can also be preserved in memory because it no longer exists. And that's where the theory begins. Maybe the player isn't walking through a real location. They might just be walking through the remains of their own memories. Think about how memories actually work. You don't remember an entire building perfectly. You remember fragments. And if that's true, then the entire game starts to make a lot more sense. You're not exploring the office because you're still alive. You're exploring it because this is where everything happened. Think about the way the office is presented to us. At first, it almost looks completely normal. It's just an empty office. Nothing immediately tells us that we're dead, or that anything supernatural has happened. But the longer we stay there, the more we realize something is fundamentally wrong. The office doesn't behave like a normal building. It keeps going and going and going. Even when we start breaking mirrors, instead of finding an outside world or some kind of escape, we just find more of the same place. It's almost like we're digging deeper into a memory rather than physically traveling through the building. And that makes the mirrors especially interesting. A mirror is supposed to show you yourself. But in memory, breaking those mirrors doesn't simply destroy a reflection. It reveals more. Almost as if every time we try and break away from what happened, we're forced to confront another part of it. And eventually, we reach confrontation, which is a badge in the game. During getting this badge, you will find a duplicate of yourself. And this is probably one of the biggest pieces of evidence for our theory. Because once we are confronted with another version of ourselves, it's not exactly friendly. It's accusing us. You are horrible. I hope you rot for what you did. Just look for yourself. And that's where I think we have to stop and ask the most important question of the entire game. What did we do? Because the game never gives us a simple answer. Nobody walks up to us and explains our crime, and there's no giant text box saying, "You did this." Instead, we are left to figure it out ourselves. And that's why I think confrontation might be the player confronting their own guilt. We are confronting a version of ourselves that remembers what happened, a version that knows the truth. And while we're wandering around this endless office, trying to figure out why we're here, that version of ourselves is essentially telling us, you already know. You know what you did, you know why you're here, and you know why you can't leave. My theory is that we did something horrible in this office, like an attack. The player must hate themselves for it. That would explain why, after death, we are still in this office, because it's the worst moment of our life. Maybe it was a shooting. No single person was involved, like a murder. It was everyone in the building. That's why we see multiple different entities, and why we are so mad at ourselves. Another thing to prove my theory is in the beginning. I'll show you a clip of how the game starts. personal theory is that this area is based off the famous quote, "We hear the wail of the remorseful wind" by Alexander Smith. This quote is essentially talking about guilt, and you carrying the guilt. Like wind carries leaves, you carry your guilt. Now, you may call my theory here a stretch, but there's actually a line very late in the game that almost completely proves my theory. While getting the badge Lost, which is one of the hardest badges to get, at the top of the screen, it says, and I quote, "The wind carries guilt around here." This almost entirely proves my theory. The office isn't necessarily trying to harm you, it's making you remember. And if my attack theory is correct, then the office isn't just a setting. It's the location where the player's life ended. The reason I think this horrible event was a shooting is the fact that we woke up here, not in jail. We were never taken to prison. Here. If it was just one person, we would have gotten jail time. But the player had such a motive to kill everyone. They weren't afraid to stop or to die. So most likely they got shot, presumably by police, because they didn't back down. They were too blinded by anger, got caught in the middle of everything, and were ultimately shot. And whatever happened after is what we're experiencing now. Not the actual event happening again, but the memory of it, over and over. That's where the idea of limbo comes in. Maybe after dying, the player never truly moved on. They're stuck inside the last major event of their life. Every hallway, every room, every puzzle, every strange occurrence, it's all a part of a distorted reconstruction of what actually happened. And that's why the office can feel so endless, because we're not actually walking through an infinitely large building, we're walking through an infinitely repeating memory. And the player keeps searching for an exit because, in their perspective, they don't know that there isn't one. They're dead, there's nowhere to escape. And maybe that's why the game has so many different endings. They're all just new things or reflections of what you did when you were alive, but it's twisted. If we had died so recently, why is everything so strange? Another theory I have is that the character wasn't in a good mental state. Could be drugs, could be blind rage, or just a medical condition. That would explain why the map is the way it is. Or it's just a style. I have no idea. Another piece of lore that can help our theory is the clock in the office building. After staring at the clock for a while, it will slow down, and the map changes around you. On screen, you will see text that is directly talking to the player, talking about how they don't remember, and how it will make them remember. And you will find yourself in a forest. The only thing in it are a ton of trees, a cabin, and a key, which is like the hardest thing to find. Once you do find it, and you find the cabin, you can walk in. It's hard to tell, but if you click the bed, sound effects will play. I'll just let you listen. Okay, pretty gruesome, right? This scene represents the player reliving their memories. And this memory shows they murdered someone, seemingly for the love of the game. It's just more evidence that proves our character was a truly horrible person, and it shows that the player wasn't afraid of taking other people's lives, and may not have even had a motive to begin with. Now let's move on to the pale-skinned, black-clothed creatures we see. What are they actually watching? And more importantly, why are they watching us? Many questions. For context, they were never given a name by the creator, NPando 1, but many people online have been calling these creatures Watchers, so we will call them that for this video. At first, you could easily assume they're just the game's monsters. They're creepy, they appear in places they shouldn't be, and their presence immediately makes the environment feel unsafe, even when they pose no real threat. But I don't think they're simply monsters chasing the player. I think they're connected to the player's guilt. Remember our theory. The player committed some kind of attack inside the office building, died during the event, and now is trapped in a distorted version of the location. If that's true, then the Watchers could represent the people who saw what happened. Think about it. The player is constantly being watched. Even when the office appears empty, there's always the possibility that one of these figures is somewhere nearby. Almost like the player can never escape being watched, and that would make the name Watcher incredibly fitting. They're not necessarily there to kill you, they are there to witness you, just like they did. But why do they look like that? This is where things get even stranger. They're not normal-looking people. They're pale, dressed almost entirely in black, and they don't really look like ordinary people who would have been inside of an office building. Now, this could be the game style, but I think we're not actually seeing the people themselves. On top of my mental state theory, where the player is under some type of influence, this could be that we are seeing how the player remembers them. But it's clear they are different. Some can feel, some can think, and some just run after you. I brought it up earlier in the video, but we are going to take another look at the badge Lost, which is a very lore-heavy badge. I'll just play the clip for you. Now, as you can see, one of these watchers was so incredibly angry at the player. Once it realized it was there, it broke a pane of glass and charged directly at it. This could have even been one of the victims that the player had taken the life of. Think about what happens to people in nightmares. You don't always remember someone's face correctly. Sometimes you remember their silhouette, but their clothes and their face are gone. Their presence is what remains, and potentially what these figures are. Not literal people, distorted memories of people. The player's mind has taken the people connected to the event and turned them into these strange, identical figures. The Watchers aren't just an enemy. They are a representation of you forgetting who was actually in that office. Maybe the player hasn't been dead for years. Maybe the game takes place just moments after their death. Their consciousness hasn't accepted that they're gone yet, so their mind reconstructs the final location. That would explain why everything feels strangely recent while simultaneously feeling disconnected from reality. They're experiencing their final moments over and over. Questions are still to be had, and more information and updates might come out in the future. But for now, I've been Pak, and it's all your fault.